Victim personal statements are an important part of providing justice for victims and for gaining insight into the events which have occurred and how they have impacted the lives of those affected by criminal activity going forward. Within this presentation, I will argue the positives of victim personal statements. So, what exactly are they? Well, victim personal statements are a piece of written evidence in which a victim of a crime can discuss the wider impact that a crime has had upon their life since the incident itself occurred. If the victim is deceased, then it is upon a family member to provide the opportunity to present a personal statement. Types of impact often include physical injury, emotional distress, such as if the occurrence of the crime has impacted your mental well-being, such as giving feelings of anxiety, PTSD, and so forth, a social impact, which is how you may interact with others, such as a change in attitude or demeanour, and finally, a financial impact, which may be any monetary issues, such as loss of money as a result of the crime itself, or the inability to work due to other issues in which were mentioned previously. It should, however, be noted that the details of the crime itself should not be discussed, as that is irrelevant to the type of document that the VPS is, and may be redacted. Given how long the judiciary system in the United Kingdom has been in place, victim personal statements haven't been around all that long. They were first implemented into the justice system on October 1st, 2001, with the original intent of providing victims with a mean to address the wider effects of the crime which they had experienced and to express their concerns going forward. To ensure the victim personal statement scheme was successful and regulated, a full guideline was produced and is contained within the Criminal Practice Direction of 2013, which states that the evidence must be in admissible form, the court must pass what it judges to be appropriate sentence having regard to the circumstances of the offence and of the offender taking into account so far as the court think is appropriate, the consequences of the offence to the victim, and the opinions of the victim or the victim's close relatives as to the appropriate level of the sentence are not relevant. If the situation arises where the victim personal statement will be utilised within the trial, it must be done so under the cover of Section 9 of the Criminal Justice Act of 1967, with Section 9 laying out a list of precursors as to ensure the authenticity of the statement, as to ensure that it is not being used in a negative manner as to potentially manipulate or falsify information going forward in the trial. Now we have discussed the history and what they actually are, but how are they used within the justice system? Well, they provide the following. They give victims an opportunity to state how the crime has affected them, whether it be physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially, or in any other way. It allows victims to express their concerns in relation to bail, or the fear or intimidation by or on behalf of the defendant. It provides victims with a means by which they can state whether they want information about, for example, the progress of the case. And it provides victims with the opportunity to state whether they want to claim compensation or request support from the victim support or any other agency. Finally, it provides the criminal justice agencies with a ready source of information on how the particular crime has affected the victim involved. So, why are the victim accounts important? Well, they provide further insight into key areas of the crime in which may have been previously overlooked, or which may not have been explored in enough depth during the proceedings, which in turn could lead to more light being shed upon the crime itself. Considering that they are also used during parole hearings, another important aspect arises. This is the fact that it becomes evident that further information may be required as to determine whether or not a criminal's time will be better served in prison, or whether they can be of use to society and thus released into the outside world. A victim personal statement may be required in cases of parole to determine whether or not this is indeed the case. Finally, and possibly the most important reason, is the fact that they act as a form of therapy for the victims. This is due to a variety of reasons, such as the fact that it provides the means for the victim to directly confront the atrocity in which was committed against them in a safe and controlled environment, allowing them to gain some form of closure. In addition to this, it also provides a manner of regaining control, which is incredibly important in a lot of cases, dependent upon the crime, as the victim is able to have a direct part in contributing to the justice and rehabilitation of the criminal. In the majority of cases, victim personal statements do make an appearance, but this is not always the case. This is due to the fact that the information within a statement may only come to light at the discretion of the judge or the defence. If it does come to light, it's important to ask whether or not it may impact the sentencing. It can be considered that the content of a victim personal statement can provide more accurate and concise information into the actual crime and the consequences that is presented for the victim, which in turn could allow for the judgment to be made based more accurately on the actual victim's accounts. In addition to this, it could also present a new point of view for the jurors. Having been a juror at one point myself, I can attest that you go into each case not knowing what to expect, but the presentation of a victim personal statement allows you to see the real-world consequences of a crime, and not just the reportings of it for a third party, which in turn opens the jurors' eyes more into the reality of the situation that could potentially lead them to making a more informed decision based upon the information in which they are presented with. There is also the fear, however, with this that the jurors may become biased and support one side over another, due to, say, potentially a prior experience. If this does occur, then it is entirely possible for a juror to announce to the court clerk that they are unable to participate in this trial due to the inability to remain impartial. If there is a need for it, then it is entirely possible for the judge or defence to call upon the victim or author of the victim personal statement to cross-examine them in court as a means of authenticating their recollection, as to check for any discrepancies in an attempt to discredit them. However, victims are told that their recollections must operate under Section 9 of the Criminal Justice Act of 1967, which attempts to ensure the authenticity of their statements. One question which may arise, however, is whether or not a judge may remain impartial when taking into account a crime and the victim's statement, and provide a punishment accordingly. This, however, is not a concern, as judges act as a neutral force within the courtroom, enforcing the rules and regulations in which are set out before them, and exacting a punishment in which is fitting for the crime. This does not, however, mean that a victim personal statement will not impact the sentencing. These statements may highlight the true atrocities of a crime, and its effects upon the person, which in turn could result in the judge providing a means of punishment in which they believe will fit in with the line of the crime. It is important to take into account the bigger picture as well with victim personal statements, especially with regards to the media. As I stated previously, the act of writing a personal statement can act as a means of therapy for those who require it, and in doing so, in some cases where there may be larger names, and which may be in the public eye, there is a potential for a knock-on effect to happen. If it comes out in the media that aspects of a victim personal statement may relate somewhat to another person who has been through a similar ordeal, it may in fact lead to more people speaking out about their experiences. A recent instance of this, for example, could be seen in the Me Too movement, which, if you are not familiar, is a movement from 2017 and extending into this year, in which a variety of statements and reports surfaced about multiple well-known Hollywood executives who had previously sexually assaulted multiple people, with these reports in turn giving others the courage to speak up about what has happened to them. Although this is not identical in this situation, it can be used to draw comparisons with victim personal statements and how they can lead to more accusations and people revealing crimes and the like in which have happened to them. In conclusion, it becomes ever more apparent that the accounts of victims and the impacts of the crimes against them are just as important as the crimes in which were committed themselves, as although the crime may occur over such a short period of time with such a limited impact on a larger scale, for the victim it may haunt them for the rest of their days. That's why it is incredibly important that these statements maintain their position in our criminal justice system, as without them, victims are left without closure and with the constant fear that a crime may not be justly punished.